What up, my people? After watching this video, you'll be able to graph an exponential function. Let's get it. Let's start with some vocabulary. We have some rules for exponents. These are properties of exponents. If b is raised to the -1 power, that's the same thing as 1 divided by b. Similarly, if we have b to the -n power, we're just going to move the b to the n to the denominator of the fraction and make it positive. If b is raised to the 0 power, that's going to be 1. And if b is raised to the first power, that's equal to b. The second thing that we need to go over is what the coefficient is going to do to our equation and to our graph, as long as a doesn't equal 0. If 0 is less than a, which is less than 1, then we'll have a vertical shrink of our graph. If a is greater than 1, we'll have a vertical stretch. And if a is less than 0, we're going to have a reflection over the x-axis, which means the graph will flip from positive to negative or negative to positive. For example number 1, we have graph the exponential function f of x is equal to -3/2 times 2 to the x power. We have to plot 5 points on the graph of the function and then graph it. Because I have a limited amount of space, I can't really graph if it gets too big, but we'll do our best. So we begin with x is equal to -2. So we're going to plug in -2 for the x. So we have f of -2 is equal to -3/2 times 2 to the -2 power. Remember, we're dealing with a negative exponent, so we're going to move that to the bottom and make it a positive. So really that's going to be -3/2 times 1/2 squared is 4. So that's going to be -3/8. When x is equal to -1, we have -3/2 times 2 to the -1 power. Anything raised to the -1 power has to be moved to the denominator and made positive. So that's going to be -3/2 times 1/2. And when we multiply that together, we get -3/4. For x is equal to 0, the f of 0 is going to be -3/2 times 2 to the 0 power. Anything raised to the 0 power is just 1. So that's going to be really -3/2 times 1, which is -3/2. When x is equal to 1, we have f of 1 is equal to -3/2 times 2 to the first power. 2 to the first power is the same thing as 2. So you have 3/2 times 2. And that will cancel, leaving us with a -3. And lastly, we have f of 2 is equal to -3/2 times 2 to the second power. That will be equal to -3/2 times 4. And we can reduce that, and that's going to be equal to -6. So when x is equal to -2, my y value is going to be -3/8. When x is -1, my y value will be -3/4. When x is 0, my y value will be -3/2. When x is 1, I'll be at -3. And when x is 2, I'll be at -6. So those are my 5 points that I need to plot. So we have -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And then we need to go down to -6. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we plot. At x is -2, I should be at -3/8. -3/8 is close to -1/2. So that'll be somewhere close to here. At -1, I'll be at -3/4. So that'll be closer to -1. At 0, I'll be at negative 3/2, which is 1.5. At 1, I'll be at negative 3. And at 2, I'll be at negative 6. And the last thing I need to do is combine the light. And then we graph. And that's it. For example number 2, we're going to be dealing with f of x is equal to 4/3 times 3 to the x power. We need to plot 5 points on the graph of the function. So we have f of negative 2 is equal to 4/3 3 to the x power, which is going to be negative 2. Because we have a negative exponent, we move it to the denominator. So it's going to be 4/3, and 3 squared is going to be 9. So that's going to be 4/27. For f of negative 1, we have 4/3 3 to the negative 1 power. That's the same thing as 4/3 times 1/3, which will give us 4/9. We have f of 0, so x equals 0, so we have 4/3 times 3 to the 0 power. Anything to the 0 power is just 1, so it's really 4/3 times 1, which is going to be 4/3. We have f of 1, which is going to be 4/3 times 3 to the first power, which is just going to be 3. So 4/3 times 3/1. We can reduce that, and that becomes 4. And then lastly, we have f of 2 is equal to 4/3 times 3 squared. 3 squared is 9. So we have 4/3 times 9/1. We can reduce that, and that becomes 12. So when x is equal to negative 2, we have 4/27. When x is negative 1, we have 4/9. When x is equal to 0, we have 4/3. When x is equal to 1, we have 4. And when x is equal to 2, we have 12. So we have our 5 points. And now we graph. All right, so then we graph. So we have negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2 for our x values, and then we have our y's. Our y's are going to be ranging from incredibly small up to 12. We don't have that kind of space on our graph. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. We'll just get a little creative with it. So at x is equal to negative 2, we have 4/27. That is incredibly close to 0, so we're just going to put something really close to 0. At negative 1, we're at 4/9, so that's again really tiny. At 0, we're going to be at 4/3. So that would be 1 1/3, which would be right around here. So it'll be at 1 1/3, and if this is 1, then 1 1/3 would be somewhere in here. At 1, we'll be at 4, so we'll be up here. And then at 2, we'll be at 12, which is way up here. And now all we have to do is just combine the dots. And that's it. All right, we're at that point. Here's a problem for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video and take a screenshot. There will be a link to the solution in the description. Please like if you understood the tutorial. Please share and subscribe for more tutorials. And thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself, making a weakness a strength. Ashe.